I pressed my palm against the cold glass separating me from my son, watching the machines breathe for him. Each beep of the monitor felt like a countdown I couldn't stop. Michael had been in the ICU for 6 days since the semi-truck crossed the median on I-5. 6 days of watching my only child fight for his life while doctors gave me estimates I couldn't afford to hear. The brain surgery that could save him would cost $427,000. My teacher's pension and Social Security gave me $2,100 a month. I had $23,000 left from selling my house after Richard died. Do the math. It didn't work. At 64 years old, I thought I'd already survived the worst life could throw at me, raising Michael alone after my first husband left, putting myself through college while working nights at a diner. Richard's 3-year battle with pancreatic cancer that took everything we'd saved, but this was different. This was watching my 38-year-old son, a father himself to 2 little girls, slip away because I couldn't write a check. "Mrs. Bennett?" A nurse touched my shoulder. "There's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent." I didn't want to see anyone. Michael's ex-wife had already been and gone, taking the girls back to Portland with promises to return. My sister was flying in from Phoenix tomorrow. Who else was there? The man waiting in the family consultation room wore an expensive suit that looked out of place in the fluorescent hospital lighting. He stood when I entered, though he didn't offer his hand. "Mrs. Dorothy Bennett? I'm Richard Caldwell, attorney for Mr. James Whitmore. My client would like to discuss a proposition with you." "I don't know any James Whitmore." I moved to sit down, exhausted. "No, but he knows of you. Mr. Whitmore has been following your son's case in the news. He's prepared to make you an offer regarding Michael's medical expenses." My heart jumped. "Is this some kind of charity?" "Not exactly." Mr. Caldwell pulled out a thick envelope. "Mr. Whitmore requests that you meet with him tomorrow at 2 p.m. at his estate in Mercer Island. He'll explain everything then." "This is legitimate, Mrs. Bennett. I assure you. I should have been suspicious. Should have questioned why a stranger would care about my problems. But when you're drowning, you don't question the hand reaching down, you just grab it." That night, I Googled James Whitmore. The results were sparse but impressive. Former tech industry CEO who'd made billions in the early days of software development. Retired for the past 15 years after a massive stroke left him partially paralyzed. His wife had died 10 years ago. One daughter, Victoria, who ran several of his charitable foundations. He lived in seclusion on Mercer Island, rarely photographed, never interviewed. The photos I found were all old, from before the stroke. A tall, distinguished man with sharp features and intelligent eyes. The most recent image was from 7 years ago at a charity gala, him in a wheelchair, his daughter standing behind him. He looked stern, almost angry. The next afternoon, I drove my 12-year-old Camry across the I-90 bridge to Mercer Island. The Whitmore estate sat behind iron gates, at the end of a long private road. The house was stunning, modern glass and steel overlooking Lake Washington, but it felt more like a fortress than a home. A woman in her 50s answered the door. "Mrs. Bennett? I'm Catherine, Mr. Whitmore's assistant. Please follow me." She led me through rooms that belonged in an architecture magazine. Everything was pristine, expensive, and utterly impersonal. We ended up in a library with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the lake. James Whitmore sat in a motorized wheelchair by the window. "Mrs. Bennett," his voice was strong despite his age, "thank you for coming. Please, sit." I sat in the chair across from him. Up close, he was still striking. Silver hair, sharp blue eyes that missed nothing, probably mid-70s. But there was something hard in his expression, like he'd built walls no one could climb. "I'll be direct," he said. "I need a wife." "You need money for your son's surgery. I'm proposing a business arrangement." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "A legal marriage, 1-year term. You would live here, act as my wife in public settings, manage the household. In return, I'll pay for your son's medical care in full, plus a monthly salary of $15,000. After 1 year, we divorce quietly, and you receive an additional $100,000. This is insane." The words came out before I could stop them. "It's practical." He leaned back in his wheelchair. "My daughter Victoria is attempting to have me declared incompetent to manage my own affairs. She claims my isolation and disability make me unfit." If I can demonstrate that I'm capable of maintaining a normal life, including a marriage, her case collapses. Once the legal matter is resolved, we part ways. Why me? You're recently widowed, so there's no romantic complication. You're educated, well-spoken, and desperate enough to consider this. Plus, you're age-appropriate. A younger woman would be too obvious. I should have walked out, but I kept seeing Michael's face, the machines, the countdown. What exactly would you expect from me? You'd have your own suite of rooms. No physical relationship, obviously. You'd need to attend some social functions, host occasional dinners, be seen in public with me. You'd also assist with daily tasks as needed. I have a medical aide who comes daily, but having a wife present would strengthen the appearance of normalcy. I sat in silence. $427,000. Michael's life. 1 year of pretending. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow evening. He nodded toward Catherine. My lawyer will send you the contract to review. It's thorough and fair. If you agree, we can arrange the marriage within the week. I drove back to the hospital in a daze. That night, I sat with Michael's ex-wife Jennifer in the ICU waiting room and told her everything. Dorothy, that's crazy. She stared at me. You can't marry a complete stranger. Can you pay for the surgery? The question came out harsher than I meant. She looked away. You know I can't. Tom and I are barely making our mortgage. Then what choice do I have? The GoFundMe page had raised $34,000 in 2 weeks. It was generous, but nowhere near enough. I had no other assets, no one to borrow from. This was it. I called Mr. Caldwell the next morning. The contract arrived by messenger that afternoon. 12 pages of legal language that basically said 1-year marriage, specific duties, payment schedule, confidentiality clauses, exit conditions. If either party violated terms, everything was void. At 6 p.m., I called the number James had given me. Mr. Whitmore, this is Dorothy Bennett. I accept your offer. 5 days later, I stood in a courthouse in downtown Seattle and married James Whitmore. I wore a navy dress I'd owned for years. He wore a dark suit and sat in his wheelchair throughout the brief ceremony. Mr. Caldwell and Catherine were our witnesses. There was no kiss, no celebration, just signatures on paper and a nod from James. I moved into the estate that evening. Catherine showed me to a suite on the east wing, 3 rooms with a private bathroom and a view of the lake. Everything was beautiful and cold. Mr. Whitmore takes breakfast at 7 a.m., in the sunroom, and dinner at 6:30 p.m., in the dining room, Catherine explained. He spends most of his time in his study on the 2nd floor. He values his privacy. I noticed his wheelchair. Does he need much assistance? The aide, Marcus, comes at 9 a.m. for physical therapy and personal care. You won't need to do anything medical, just companionship. The first week was surreal. James and I ate meals together in complete silence. Him reading the Wall Street Journal, me checking my phone for updates about Michael. The surgery had been scheduled, funded by a check from James that cleared the same day we married. The neurosurgeon was optimistic. Our only conversations were about upcoming obligations. A charity dinner in 2 weeks. A gallery opening the week after. James briefed me on names and faces I'd need to remember. You'll need appropriate clothing, he said one morning. Catherine will take you shopping. Send the bills to my accountant. I have clothes. Not for these events. It wasn't condescending, just factual. You'll need to look the part of Mrs. Whitmore. Catherine took me to boutiques in downtown Seattle I'd never stepped foot in. We bought evening gowns, cocktail dresses, jewelry. The saleswomen called me Mrs. Whitmore, and I felt like an imposter in an expensive costume. The first charity dinner was terrifying. I wore a burgundy gown that cost more than my monthly pension. Catherine helped me with my hair and makeup. When I came downstairs, James was waiting in the foyer. He looked distinguished in his tuxedo. You look appropriate, he said, which I think was his version of a compliment. Stay close to me. I'll handle most conversations. But everyone wanted to talk to me. The mysterious James Whitmore had married after 10 years as a widower, and Seattle society wanted to know everything about the new Mrs. Whitmore. I smiled and told them I'd been a high school English teacher, that we'd met through mutual friends, that it was a quiet romance. James stayed nearby, his hand occasionally touching mine in gestures that looked affectionate but felt mechanical. "You did well," he said in the car going home. "You're a convincing actress." The word stung more than it should have. Michael's surgery was successful. Dr. Patel called me a week after I'd moved into the estate. The operation went better than expected. He's in recovery now, and the early signs are very promising. I cried in my room that night, relief overwhelming me. The next morning at breakfast, I told James. "That's excellent news," he said without looking up from his newspaper. "Dr. Patel is highly regarded in his field." "You talked to him?" "I'm funding the treatment. I like to stay informed." "You could have told me." "I'm telling you now." But his voice softened slightly. "I'm pleased for your son, Dorothy." It was the first time he'd used my name instead of Mrs. Bennet. The second month, something shifted. I started spending evenings in the library reading while James worked in his study upstairs. Sometimes he'd come down for a book, and we'd exchange more than polite nothings. "You like mysteries," he observed one night, seeing my stack of Agatha Christie novels. "I like puzzles," I said, figuring out what's hidden. "So do I." He pulled a book from the shelf. "Have you read this one?" "A first edition of Murder on the Orient Express." "A dozen times." "Then we have something in common." He started leaving books on my sitting room table. Rare editions, signed copies, books I'd mentioned in passing. I never saw him deliver them, but I knew it was him. I also started noticing strange things, small inconsistencies that didn't add up. His wheelchair would be in different positions than I'd left it. Books on shelves too high for him to reach would be moved. Once, I found a coffee cup on the kitchen counter, which made no sense because James always had his coffee in the sunroom and couldn't maneuver his wheelchair into that part of the kitchen. "Catherine," I asked one afternoon while she was organizing James's schedule, "has Mr. Whitmore always used the wheelchair? I mean, since the stroke?" She looked up from her laptop. "Yes." "Why do you ask?" "Just curious about his medical history. Does he have much mobility at all?" "You'd need to ask him that, Mrs. Bennet." Her tone was carefully neutral. "It's not my place to discuss Mr. Whitmore's condition." The third month, Victoria Whitmore made her appearance. She arrived unannounced on a Tuesday morning, sweeping past Catherine into the foyer where I was arranging fresh flowers. "So you're the teacher my father bought to play house with." She was about my age but looked younger, with perfect hair and cold eyes. "Did he tell you about his paranoia? How he thinks everyone is after his money? I think you should leave. I'm his daughter. I have every right to be here." She stepped closer. "You should know what you've gotten yourself into. My father hasn't been mentally competent since the stroke. He sees conspiracies everywhere. This marriage is just another delusion." "That's enough, Victoria." James's voice came from the top of the stairs. I looked up to see him in his wheelchair, positioned at the elevator that brought him between floors. "Father, this woman is clearly taking advantage of you. Leave my home. Now. I'll be back with lawyers." Victoria's smile was sharp. "Enjoy your little arrangement while it lasts, Dorothy." After she left, I expected James to say something, but he just returned to his study. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I heard something from upstairs, a thud, like furniture moving. I put on my robe and went to investigate. The door to James's study was slightly open. I pushed it wider and froze. James was standing at the window, his wheelchair empty across the room. He was looking out at the lake, his posture straight and strong. There was nothing wrong with his legs. My gasp gave me away. He turned, and for a moment, pure panic crossed his face. "Dorothy." It wasn't a greeting. It was a plea. "You can walk." The words came out flat. "You've been able to walk this whole time. Please, just let me explain. You lied to me." I stepped into the room. "This whole thing, the disability, it's all fake?" "No. It's complicated." He moved toward his wheelchair, but I held up my hand. "Don't. Don't get back in that chair and pretend. I deserve the truth." He stopped, standing there in his pajamas, looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. "You're right. I can walk. I've been able to walk for 3 years. Why? Why would you pretend?" "Because I needed to know." His voice cracked. "After the stroke, everyone circled like vultures. My business partners wanted me declared incompetent so they could take control. My wife, before she died, she admitted she'd been having an affair for years, staying only for the money. Victoria hasn't spoken to me except through lawyers since I changed my will to reduce her inheritance. So you tested them. The pieces clicked together, by pretending to be helpless. He nodded. When I recovered, I didn't tell anyone. I wanted to see who would stay, who actually cared. His laugh was bitter. Turns out, no one did. The business partners left when I sold my shares. My wife died hating me. Victoria only visits when she wants something. So I stayed in the chair. It was easier than facing how alone I really was. I should have been angry, should have felt betrayed. But all I felt was sadness for this brilliant, broken man who'd trapped himself in a prison of his own making. What about me? I asked quietly. Was I a test too? At first. He met my eyes. I needed a wife to fight Victoria's incompetency claim. Someone who needed money enough to agree, but who had integrity. I thought you'd play the role and leave. But you've been kind to me, Dorothy. You talk to me like I'm a person, not a bank account or a patient. You leave me books and ask about my day, and you don't want anything except what we agreed on. Because that's the deal. Is it? He moved closer. Or is it because you're a decent person who doesn't have an ulterior motive? I don't know what to say. Say you won't tell anyone. His voice turned desperate. Victoria's lawyers are looking for any excuse. If they find out I've been hiding my recovery, they'll twist it as mental illness, paranoia, exactly what she said today. I'll lose everything. James, this isn't healthy. You can't live your whole life in that chair, hiding from the world. What choice do I have? The choice to trust someone. I held his gaze. The choice to live honestly. And if everyone betrays me again, then at least you'll know you tried. He sank into his wheelchair, not because he needed to, but because he was exhausted. I can't, Dorothy. I can't risk it. I left him there and went back to my room. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, we didn't speak about it. James was back in his wheelchair at breakfast, and I didn't call him out, but everything had changed. I saw him differently now, not as disabled but as imprisoned. And every time he reached for something just out of range, every time he asked for help he didn't actually need, I felt my heart break a little more. Michael came home from the hospital 2 weeks later. Jennifer called to tell me he was being released to a rehab facility, that the doctors were amazed at his progress. I should have been purely happy, but I was too tangled up in James's web of lies and loneliness. That night, James and I had our first real conversation since the revelation. We were in the library, the fire crackling, rain pattering against the windows. "Your son is doing well," he said. "You must be relieved." "I am." I set down my book. "Thank you for making it possible." It was a transaction. Was it? I looked at him. Because it doesn't feel like one anymore. What does it feel like? Like I'm watching someone I care about slowly suffocate. He was quiet for a long moment. I tried once. After my wife died, I told Victoria I could walk. She accused me of faking the stroke for attention, said I was mentally unstable. She filed the first incompetency petition then. I got back in the chair and she dropped it. "So you're trapped." "We're all trapped by something, Dorothy. What's yours?" "Fear." I said it before I could think. Fear that I'm not enough, that I couldn't save Richard from cancer, that I almost lost Michael because I didn't have enough money, that I'm a 64-year-old woman who had to sell herself into a fake marriage because she failed at everything else. "You didn't fail." James leaned forward. "You're here. You're fighting. That's not failure. Neither is trusting people. Maybe." He smiled sadly. "Or maybe I'm just a coward." The 4th month, Victoria made her move. She filed a formal petition to have James declared mentally incompetent, claiming he was delusional, paranoid, and being manipulated by a gold-digging wife. The court date was set for 2 months out. James's lawyer, Mr. Caldwell, was confident. "We have the prenup, witnesses to your public appearances, and James's medical records show no cognitive decline. Victoria's case is weak." But it affected James terribly. He stopped eating properly, barely slept. I could hear him pacing in his study at night, though he was always back in the wheelchair by morning. The progress we'd made, the tentative friendship, started to crack under the pressure. One night, I found him in his study, out of the wheelchair, standing at his desk, looking at papers spread everywhere. She's going to win. He didn't look up. Even if the court rules in my favor, she'll appeal. She'll keep fighting until I'm dead or broke. Then we fight back. I walked in. We prove her wrong. How? Dorothy, you don't understand. If she gets control, she'll dissolve everything. The charitable trusts, the scholarships for underprivileged kids, the medical research grants my wife and I started. She'll liquidate it all and spend it on herself. Then you need to show the court who you really are. I moved to stand across the desk from him, not the man in the wheelchair. The real you. I can't. Why not? Because what if I'm still not enough? His voice broke. What if I'm walking and talking and everyone still sees me as broken? You're not broken, James. You're scared. There's a difference. I watched him crumble then. This proud, brilliant man, and I did what felt natural. I walked around the desk and put my arms around him. He stiffened for a moment, then held on to me like I was the only solid thing in his world. I don't know how to trust anyone, he whispered. Start with me. The hearing was brutal. Victoria's lawyers painted James as a paranoid recluse who'd trapped a vulnerable widow in a sham marriage. They brought forward former business associates who testified that James had become erratic and suspicious. They showed photos of the estate's security systems, the gates, the isolation, and called it evidence of mental decline. Then Mr. Caldwell presented our case. Catherine testified about James's sharp mind, his daily management of his investments, his lucid decision-making. The accountant showed records of the charitable foundations, all running smoothly under James's guidance. Dr. Patel testified about James's support for Michael's treatment, his rational questions and understanding of complex medical information. I took the stand last. Mrs. Bennett, Victoria's lawyer began, isn't it true that you married Mr. Whitmore for money? I married him because my son needed surgery I couldn't afford. Yes, I looked at James sitting in his wheelchair. But what we have now isn't about money. So you admit this marriage is a sham? No. I turned to the judge. When I met James, I saw a business arrangement, but over these months, I've gotten to know him. He's brilliant, kind, and deeply wounded by people who used him. He built walls to protect himself, and yes, sometimes those walls look like paranoia. But that's not mental illness. That's survival. The judge looked skeptical. Mrs. Bennett, the testimony shows your husband barely leaves his home, trusts virtually no one, and lives in what witnesses describe as a fortress. I took a breath. Your Honor, may I say something directly to Mr. Whitmore? The judge nodded. I turned to James. You asked me once what my prison was. Fear. Well, yours is that chair. Not because you need it, but because you chose it. The courtroom went silent. Victoria leaned forward, her eyes sharp. You've been able to walk for 3 years. I kept my voice steady. You recovered from your stroke, but you didn't tell anyone because you wanted to test who would stay, who would care about you, not your money. And when everyone failed that test, you stayed hidden. That's not insanity, Your Honor. That's heartbreak. James sat frozen in his wheelchair. Victoria's lawyer jumped up. Your Honor, this is clearly. But James raised his hand. They all stopped. She's right. His voice was quiet but clear. He reached down and released the brake on his wheelchair. I've been lying. Not about my stroke. That was real. But about my recovery. Slowly, he stood up. The courtroom erupted. Victoria's face went white. The judge banged his gavel. James walked to the witness stand, his movements stiff from months of pretending, but strong. He looked at the judge. I apologize for the deception. After my stroke, I lost everything I thought mattered. My wife's love, my daughter's respect, my colleagues' loyalty. When I recovered, I was terrified it would happen again. So I stayed in the wheelchair. I tested everyone. And yes, I married Dorothy as part of maintaining that deception. He turned to look at me. But she saw through me anyway. She called me out, and instead of using that knowledge against me, she showed me what trust looks like. Victoria stood up. Father, this is exactly what I've been saying. You're paranoid, delusional. No, Victoria, he faced her. I'm hurt. There's a difference. You haven't spoken to me with kindness in 10 years. You only call when you want something. When I reduced your inheritance, You didn't ask why or try to understand. You just filed legal motions. He took a shaky breath. I wanted you to love me for who I am, not what I have, but you never did. Victoria's composure cracked. You gave away millions to strangers, to charities that help people. Yes, because I wanted my life to mean something beyond accumulating wealth. He turned back to the judge. I'm not mentally incompetent, Your Honor. I'm a lonely old man who made bad choices out of fear, but I'm not incapable of managing my affairs. Dorothy has shown me that I can still trust, still connect, still live honestly. The judge was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Whitmore, while I appreciate your candor, this revelation does raise questions about your judgment. I understand. James stood straight. I'm prepared to undergo any psychiatric evaluation you deem necessary. But I ask that you consider this. I built a multi-billion-dollar company. I've managed complex charitable trusts successfully for years, and I had the clarity to recognize when I was living dishonestly. That doesn't sound like incompetence to me. The judge ruled in James's favor. Victoria's petition was denied, but the win felt hollow as we left the courthouse. That night, back at the estate, James found me in the library. I'm sorry. He stood in the doorway, no wheelchair in sight. I put you in an impossible position. You told the truth. That took courage. I told the truth because you made me want to be better. He came to sit beside me. Our year is almost up. In 3 weeks, per the contract, we can file for divorce. My heart sank, though I'd known this was coming. I don't want a divorce, Dorothy. I looked up at him. What? I know what we agreed to. I know you have your life, your son, your grandchildren, but these months with you have been the happiest I've had in years. You make me want to be honest, to trust, to try, and he took my hand. I love you. Not as part of a contract. Actually love you. I'd been telling myself not to fall for him. This was business. He was my employer. But somewhere between the charity dinners and the late-night conversations and watching him finally step out of that wheelchair, I'd fallen anyway. I love you too, I whispered. Then stay. Not because of money or obligation. Stay because you want to. What about Michael? Jennifer? The girls? They can visit whenever they want. There's plenty of room. Michael can do his rehab here if he'd like. Your granddaughters can have the whole pool house. Dorothy, I'm not asking you to give up your family. I'm asking to become part of it. I kissed him then. It was clumsy and perfect, his hands cradling my face like I was precious. We renewed our vows 6 months later. Real vows this time, in the garden overlooking the lake. Michael walked me down the aisle, his recovery nearly complete. Jennifer brought the girls, who threw flower petals everywhere. Catherine cried happy tears. Even Victoria came, tentative and quiet, trying to rebuild bridges we both hoped weren't burned beyond repair. Michael lives in Seattle now with the girls, close enough to visit weekly. Jennifer remarried, and they're all doing well. James set up a college fund for my granddaughters without being asked. James and I are still at the estate, but it's not a fortress anymore. The gates stay open. We host dinners. We volunteer together at the Medical Research Foundation. James teaches business classes at the university, sharing his experience with young entrepreneurs. And the wheelchair sits in storage, gathering dust. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I married a man in a wheelchair for money and discovered he didn't need the chair at all. Neither of us needed our prisons. We just needed someone brave enough to open the door. Sometimes the best love stories start with a lie and end with the courage to live truthfully. We choose honesty every day. We keep choosing each other.